This is the third story that I'm going to be telling you guys here. Really enjoying making these, and I hope you guys enjoy them. If you do, please make sure to like and subscribe. I'm trying to do these almost daily at this point. Definitely do them more often at least. So let me know what you think, and I hope you enjoy. My name is Jeremy Brigsby. I was adopted at the age of 3. As I was just forming my abilities to create memories, I don't know any other family. My foster parents were Jack and Helen Rigsby. They were amazing people. They were retired from the Witness Protection Program. They saved countless lives through their careers. They were both in their 50s when they adopted me. They never told me that I was part of the protection program myself until I was in my late teens. I could never have asked for a better home. As a child, I had been diagnosed with schizophrenic tendencies. I would see this man. He had a tall hat that was jet black, just like his clothes and gloves. His hair flowed to his shoulders and would generally stay behind his face. He had thick, oily hair. His eyes were slightly wider than a normal human's. He had blood red eyes, though. His nose came to a point, and his skin was tan and smooth. He looked as if he was in his early 30s. His smile was massive. It would range from both sides of his face, jawbone to jawbone. He would be slightly elevated off the floor, holding a cane in both hands, pivoted off where the floor would be if he wasn't slightly floating, flush with his black formal shoes. He wore a long black trench coat. I would see this man as a child. He always scared me and would be trying to play with me. When we were out in the playground during recess at school, I would be playing with the other kids, but he would always try and get me to go away from them and walk on the outside of the playground near the woods that surrounded the school. One time I followed him. A teacher saw me and quickly stopped me and called my parents. I told them everything that had happened, and that has been happening, so they brought me to a therapist. There they diagnosed me with schizophrenia. Back then there wasn't great medication for it, and they could never find the right type for me, so I always struggled making friends growing up. Generally I hung out with the floating man. Over time I had given him the name Grin, due to his constant smile. As a preteen I had many animals, but they always seemed to go missing. A lot of my cats were house cats, so we assumed they had just gotten outside and got lost. We only had one dog, though. My adopted father never really wanted a dog and was bothered by his presence, so I assumed he just brought him to a shelter one day. I didn't have many friends due to my oddities and having a hard time keeping my thoughts straight. Due to all this, I was quite often lonely. As I progressed through my teens, however, I learned to live with my disorder and Grin. He had always been jealous of when I involved others in my life. My father had passed when I was nearing my early 20s and my mother not long after. They both lived into their 70s and left me a great deal of money, along with my childhood home. I was saddened by this and would stay home often alone with Grin. After an extensive time of this lonely and deranged existence, I was watching the television one day about a new miracle drug for my disorder. Grin floated in front of the TV, and I could see the look on his face, disappointment. He knew I was trying to get rid of him. As I called my therapist, he screamed at me, telling me to stop, that he couldn't lose me, not again. When I finally made my way to their office, I was under distress. Grin had been berating me and trying to stop me since the commercial played. The therapist immediately put me under hold to ensure that I didn't hurt myself. In the padded room tied to the bed, Grin just paced around the room screaming at me and telling me that he couldn't be silenced. To my surprise, the doctors told me that they wanted me to try the new drug since no others had helped so far. Within a few days, Grin was gone, and I was a changed man. Once released, I actively tried to catch up on the life I never had. Through a year or so of therapy, I finally broke the trend. I realized I was wrong growing up, that I did deserve love and happiness. Through my childhood, I was always under the feeling that I deserved no one and deserved to be lonely. No longer did I feel this way. I not long after met my girlfriend Mariah. She was very beautiful, and we fell in love quite fast. Not long after, she moved into my house with me. For months we had amazing time together. I remember that as if it was yesterday. I started having problems again. The medication wasn't working as it did before. For the majority of the day I was lucid and fine, but nearing the end of the day I was groggy and disoriented. The medication was only to be taken once a day. A few nights in a row I would wake up screaming. Mariah would console me and help, but it was horrifying. In my sleep, I would initially wake up, unable to move. Later, I found this was called sleep paralysis. I would see Grin sitting in the corner of the room, just staring at me, disappointed with his head cocked downwards. This would be followed by darkness, and then I would wake up disturbed. One night, I fell asleep, and I woke alone. There was nobody there, just me. I scrambled to find my girlfriend, but she was gone. I assumed she just couldn't take it anymore, my constant screaming in my sleep, and being a shell of a man by nightfall. I felt as alone as the day my parents died, once again. I spiraled downwards. A few weeks later, her body was found. I caught the newscast on it. She was in the woods about 5 miles away from the house. Her body was found sitting up against a tree, her feet tucked under her, sitting on her knees. Her arms were spread out to each side, laying on the ground, palms up. There was a circle of sticks going around the tree, but the horrifying part, her face was cut from jawbone to jawbone. Her head cocked to the side, her eyes looking up towards the sky, her bottom jaw resting on the opposite shoulder. On the tree above her, there was a symbol carved inside of it, an upside-down V with a curved line going through the lower portion of the V. Her blood was all over the symbol. At this, I fell apart. After going to my therapist for the first time in months, she noticed that some of my old habits were coming back. Not looking into her eyes, a dulled tone, and lifeless. She decided to see if I wished to self-admit and find a better medication. It was now a few years since my last medication change, and more advances had been made in the field, so I decided to take her advice. After a few trials, they found one that seemed to work well for me. I was released not long after. For years, I continued to be single, travel, and try to find my new passion in life. It was by accident that in my travels I would find a woman by the name of Mary. She was one of the great wonders of the world. She made me remember why love was so important. We settled down over time, and I decided to move back to my old town. She always wanted to live in the South, and I had longed to revisit my hometown and reconnect with my old therapist. When we settled down, we eventually had 2 children, a boy named Zach and a girl named Seraphine. We were the perfect family. For many years, I didn't see Grin. I didn't have any issues. It had seemed that we had found my perfect medication. I had visited my therapist over time, just to have dinner and reconnect. She passed not a few years after I moved back into town. By the time Zach was 10 and Seraphine was 12, I decided it was time for me and Mary to revisit our pastime and go to the campsite that I had visited as a child just a few miles away. It had been so many years since I had been there. We had decided to rent a camper and stay for 4 days. The first day at the campground, we had a blast. We went fishing, we had a fire, tucked in the kids around 9, and had a few drinks, then proceeded to retire to the camper. The second day, however, we decided to hike the nearby trail. There was one point at which there was a massive drop-off to a valley that was awe-inspiring. Me and my wife decided to both take a look, but separately. For one of us to stay with the children a few feet away, and each take turns looking over the old rusty rail that had been put up to keep people from vaulting over the edge. It was beautiful. My wife, however, had been walking over to the edge and tripped on a rock. She stopped herself from plummeting off the edge, but the pack she had with our various personal care items that was slung over her shoulder had fallen off and went tumbling down the cliff edge. We had decided, since we were 3 nights out from going home, we would just get whatever supplies we need from town and return to the campsite that night. We also ordered a new set of meds for me, but it would take a few days for their arrival. That night, I had nightmares for the first time in years. It was the crime scene of my childhood girlfriend Mariah, but it was odd, because instead of the 2-dimensional photos I had seen, it oddly seemed 3-dimensional, as if I had seen the crime scene myself and not just the photos in the papers. I woke up screaming. My wife quickly consoled me and figured, since I didn't have my meds, I was having nightmares. She asked if I was showing other symptoms, but I wasn't. She hugged me and we went about the start of our day. I told Zach and Seraphine I stubbed my toe not to scare them. The next night I had another dream. This was our 3rd night at the campground. This time I was driving in the car with Mariah, my old girlfriend. I couldn't see her face. It was blurry, but I could tell it was her because of her body and the clothes that I remember her wearing all those years ago. I was driving through a forested area. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw Grin. He was just sitting there and staring into the mirror. I panned the mirror over to his face and our eyes locked. He smiled bigger than I had seen him smile before. But instead of being frightened or feeling unnerved by seeing him, I just smiled back, equally as menacing. It felt like my dream paused there for a long time, and then I just woke up. This time I was disturbed, but not scared. I decided not to tell my wife and spoil another morning. My insecurities of Mariah leaving me all that time ago coming back. I didn't want Mary to leave me like Mariah had. We had another great day exploring and fishing and experiencing the wild. After we put the kids to bed the final night, me and my wife were exhausted, and this time just lied down for bed not soon after. This night, I had been revisited by Grin. I woke up, or at least I think I did, but I couldn't move a muscle. Grin was standing over my bed with that same smile he had in my dream, from ear to ear. This went on quite a while until I fell back asleep to complete darkness. When I woke, my wife wasn't there. I assumed because of not having my meds, I must have slept in, and she just let me sleep for the morning. I figured she was outside preparing breakfast on her small griddle, but when I got outside, no one was there. I ran into the camper to find the kids, but they were gone too. I started panicking and screaming their names outside the trailer. Many neighboring trailers started looking with me, and I ran to the front office to tell them to call 911. After a large search, they found them in the forest, just like Mariah, the same way. My wife was in the middle. There was a grouping of 3 trees, her hands reaching out just like Mariah's. The children were on either side of her, pinned up to their own trees. They all suffered the same fate as Mariah, all looking up to the sky, mouths cut side from side. I was broken and scared. This was the exact same, and the only constant was me. I told the police I must have done it. They were confused. There was no evidence to show I did it, but they still cuffed me and threw me in a cell. I had been without my medication for days now, and Grin was back, but now he sat on the outside of the cell saying nothing to me, just staring at me with no expression. I screamed for him to talk to me, tell me what's happening. That night I woke up paralyzed, just as I had before, but this time Grin was walking around my bed. He said, "I told you, all you need is me." I figured it was a matter of time before I told you everything. You were adopted into witness protection, but your parents never told you why. Think hard. Where am I from? Where did you see me first? I sat there with a confused look. You were with me and your mother as a child in those very same woods. You were sitting with us when he did this to us. He raised his hand and pointed to one side of his face and ran it along his lip to the other side of his face. They never caught the man. But he did this to me and your mother. The exact same thing you did to those poor people. I told you that all you ever needed was me. The pets you had as a child, that was me. Or you. At this, my eyes opened wide, and all the images rushed into my head. My dogs, my cats. I wore gloves just like the man who killed my parents, and a wetsuit. There was a knife in my hand, harming those animals. I suffocated them and pinned them against a tree. I saw Grin standing next to me. My girlfriend in the car, with me, screaming to please let her go. My wife and kids wondering where I was going. I saw myself dragging them out of the car. Mariah, Mary, Zach, Seraphine. Strangled them, one by one, methodically, slitting their cheeks. I saw myself posing them on the trees, and burning all the evidence and burying it miles away. "You see," said Grin, "you can never leave me, and I will never leave you. You suppressed me for so many years." At this, I woke up screaming. The guards came to my cell and noticed my clear state of insanity. They had emergency services evaluate me and realized I was without my meds. They re-administered them immediately. I went to court and I told the judge that I did it. I told him that I killed my girlfriend all those years ago. I didn't want a defense, and I thought I deserved love, but I didn't even deserve life. Since I was on my medication again, I had not seen Grin since that night in the cell. They gave me the death penalty, and I waived my right to an appeal. I was found guilty of premeditated murder. And now look at all of you, and all I could say is, I'm so sorry. I assume this isn't the story you wanted to hear. I didn't mean to do any of this, and I hope my death brings you great comfort. I deserve this. This will conclude my confession. I turned to the executioner. I said, "I'm ready." At that, the table tipped backwards, and I saw the 3 vials that were going to be used to end my life. 2 men flipped a switch, administering a sedative to my veins. I had read up on the drugs administered so that I knew how I was going to die. They had to take me off my meds to ensure nothing went wrong with the execution. After the sedative kicked in, I was nodding off. Then they both each flipped another switch. This was the neuromuscular blocking drug, to stop my body from being able to move or speak. The 3rd drug to be administered is potassium chloride. That would stop my heart. At this, my eyes opened. It said that some patients can wake up after all the drugs are administered, but this felt just like another sleep paralysis. As I scanned the room unable to move, my heart felt as if it was exploding. And that's when I saw him, Grin. He was standing behind Mary's family. There he was, just looking straight at me. My heart was pounding, trying hard to function, but quickly stiffening up. That's when I saw Grin look down and tip his hat to me. I felt my heart stop. Grin smiled, with his head halfway cocked down. A few moments after this, just like all those fateful nights, everything went black. I hope you enjoyed this story. I had a lot of fun writing it. I feel like I liked the mix between schizophrenia and sleep paralysis and making it in a way that could be real rather than some ghost or something of the sort forcing him to do these things. So I really hope you enjoyed the story. If you can, please like and subscribe. If possible, share it. I appreciate your time, and I hope you have a great day.